Welcome to Insurance Suits, a podcast brought to you by AIMCO, the American Association of Insurance Management Consultants. I am Chantel Roberts.
I am Amy Johnson.
We
have with us Chantel.
This is the fun thing about us is that we never plan anything. And so we always end up talking over one another. And I think it shows how comfortable everybody is. Anyway, we have here today Scott Bushnell, who is a math genius. He does business interruption, which I have to say, as a claims adjuster, I absolutely hate. And we talked a little bit about this pre-recording about how, I don't even balance my checkbook. Welcome to the Insurance Suits podcast, a bi-monthly podcast brought to you by AIMCO, discussing the issues and the people who are involved in insurance. The views expressed by the moderators and guests represent their own views and opinions, and not necessarily the views and opinions of AIMCO, Insurance Suits, or its advertisers. And I will say every April 15th, actually a little bit after April 15th, because my tax accountant is very slow. I will say that. I love her to death, but she's very slow. She has to explain to me again how I am in debt, but still made a profit in my business. I just don't understand that. So anyway, welcome, Scott. Welcome to Insurance Suits.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be a part of this. And so just to be official, it's Scott Bushnell. I am a certified public accountant. I'm also certified in financial forensics, which is the accounting world's designation for forensic accountants.
Okay. So we now know what your specialty is. And I know that your business is called Business Interruption. It's or your email is businessinterruption.com. And I'm like, genius.
Well, it's actually Business Interruption Consulting.
Nice.
And the reason why it is such a long email is that when I got the name and, I tried to use BIC, which come to find out there's a company that makes razor blades and pins that has that. And then BI Consulting was taken.
Yeah.
And so basically I got to a point where I was like businessinterruptionconsulting.com and lo and behold, the name is available. And so now the thing that's really good is that I actually copyrighted and trademarked Business Interruption Consulting. And
Nice.
Lo and behold, the U.S. Patent Office said, yeah, you can have that trademark.
Yay!
My attorney was more surprised than I was. And I was like,
oh my gosh, that is
Yeah.
fantastic. Okay, so to toot my own horn, I have not put it up on LinkedIn or anything yet, but by the time that this airs, it probably will go up. But, I wrote a book about a year and a half ago or something like that. It's called The Art of Adjusting, and I trademarked that, The Art of Adjusting. And there was a little kickback, you can't trademark adjusting or whatever. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. But yeah, so it just came through. So now I'm a registered trademark as well. So yay, yes.
There you go. Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, well, it's interesting because people ask me, people in the insurance and even adjusters. So business interruption consulting. So do you do BI claims? And I always think they're joking. I truly always think they're joking. I'm like, haha, good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah. What's a BI claim? Yeah. But I mean, and I say all the time, it's all in the name. And what's funny is when I started the firm, my plan was to be about 90% insurance and specifically BI claims. And what has ended up happening is I'm about 80% litigation. Well, actually, I'm probably more about 60% litigation. I'm about, let's say 30% fraud investigations. And my insurance, like BI claims, is only about 10%. But in that litigation, about 90% of the litigation I'm doing is BI claims. And so most of my career, I was a first party claims guy. You call me, insurance company, insured, they call me in, come in the beginning, help them analyze, help them go through the claim. But now a lot of the work that I'm doing in the insurance field is coming in as expert testifier after claims have not been able to settle or, whatever in the litigation process. So it's been very interesting how what I thought this was going to be and what it's ultimately ended up being. And I really enjoy kind of the new focus of the practice being more of expert witness testifying and, that side of it.
So let me ask you a question then. When you said like much of your career involved coming in, looking at as kind of a consultant during the claim process versus an expert in litigation, do you think that is more because of your reputation and getting your name out, that people know that they can come back to you if they need you during litigation, or are you seeing more claims going into litigation and being litigated where they need, an expert or a consultant to help navigate through?
Well, it's interesting. It's a very good question. I would say in probably the first 20 years of my practice, I had only 3 claims that ever went into litigation. Now, part of that I would say is because I'm really good at what I do. And one of the things that I really tried to work on in my career is I can teach any accountant how to do a BI claim. I can't teach an accountant how to advise a client. There are some accountants I just can't teach that to. And so part of what I would do, especially working with insureds, is here's our calculation, here's our number. Here's what the insurance company is. The difference is this much. How much money, how much time, how much pain you want to put into to get that, right? And oftentimes what would happen, and this happened actually earlier in my career than it does necessarily now. I can't tell you how many times it's like, here, let's let the 2 forensic accountants talk about it and see if they can come up with a number. Everyone leaves the room and it's me and the other, and I had a forensic accountant on the other side that we probably settled 20 claims together. It's like, okay, what's your client's bottom line? And we'd sit back and we would look and we'd say, here's, because in every claim there's give and take. And I tell clients all the time, I don't care if you're an insurance company or if you're an insured, I can go and do a claim. I can, as a preparer, and then I can put my adjuster hat on and I can go back and say, here's where the weakness is in this claim. What I have, and I think what I've noticed so further in my career is that when I started doing more of the litigation work, that was literally someone had either found me on the internet or someone else had given them my name. And I got a case in litigation. Would you be, can you help us? Sure. What has happened over the past 5 years that I've started the firm is that now I get called, myself and my partner probably get 3 or 4 calls a week from attorneys that are like, I got a case in litigation, can you guys help us? And it's more reputational. It seems to me, though, the trend of claims going into litigation, a lot more claims are going into litigation. And I think what is happening is earlier in my career, there was a huge amount of effort of both sides don't want this to go to court. What's happening now is that I think on the insured side, primarily the insured side, it's like, that's another strategy to settle a claim. And between you and me, if that's part of your claim settlement strategy, you really have a claim litigation strategy.
Yeah. Well,
litigation could be part of settlement.
I will say, for those who are listening on the podcast, we do video this. So when Scott is talking about between here and here, you have to go to my YouTube station and watch for the hand gestures alone. CMR Consulting proudly sponsors the video recording of insurance suits. You now have a choice of watching or listening to the podcast. Go to YouTube and search for Chantel Roberts or CMR Consulting. But then too, I think that you are right, but it's interesting that you say that you feel that it's the insured and their attorneys perhaps who are pushing forward a more litigated or litigious scenario, because I tend to find when I get my expert witness cases is that the adjuster is the one who has dug in their heels. And time again, I say, guys, our title is adjuster. Our job is to adjust a claim. That is literally our title. So if the insured is saying that we owe him $1,000 and we say we owe $750, pay $750, pay what you know you owe when you know you owe it, and then debate the other part. But my God, adjust the claim, because you're gonna spend more than what, $250 paying Amy to look over it. Although Amy will probably say, no, please, get into litigation and send me the case.
Well, and we can get into what's the dynamic and how does it work. But one of the things that I truly have tried to focus on in my career, when I first started my career in forensic accounting, I worked for Campus and Stratus. We worked for insurance companies. And when I was first hired, they said, how are you in an adversarial, in an adversarial environment? And I was like, after 4 years of being in, the U.S. Army and Airborne Ranger, I was like, I'm pretty good with it, especially if I have hand grenades and ammunition. But what I found after being in, the next job I had, I worked for Deloitte. We worked for policyholders. And one of the things I used to go into, and I said, okay, instead of making this adversarial, how about we do this as a team concept? Adjuster, I'm going to explain to my client, here's how the adjusting process goes, and this is what happens, because they need to understand that. And no one else, I'm amazed how few people actually do that.
Yes.
And I have had clients that were like, why do they have to adjust? And I said, well, they get to audit what you've done. And if you don't provide the documentation, if you don't provide the analysis, if you refuse to give them the information they need, absolutely they're going to say, I can't adjust this loss, because they don't have what they need to do it. So part of my role I've always felt is advisory, educational, and also sitting down and saying, and I used to do this a lot when I was EGA. I would sit down with forensic accountants that were preparing claims. I'd sit down and say, look, I've been on your side. I know exactly what you're going through. I know how your clients are. Here's the general rules we're going to follow for this game. You provide this, you provide it to me in a reasonable period of time. I will take a reasonable period of time to review the information. I will have questions. We will discuss them. If there's additional information that we need, you'll provide it to me. We can go through and debate. And once I'm done, we can go through and debate and see, where this goes. And what was very interesting to me, people I used to work with on one side, and I go to the other side, and they were like, and this was in Australia where they have adjusters for BI. It's just part of the game there. And it was actually one of the best jobs I ever had. And it was amazing to me how people were just like, you don't approach this like anyone else. And they were like, is this how they do it in America? And I said, I really wish it was. But I said, I think America is a little bit better at, explaining that. But I think there's a lot when on focusing on the insured side, there needs to be more people that, and it's not necessarily hand-holding, it's explaining to an insured, here's how this process works. And it's going to take time. Now,
but you also need to be able to, and you and I have had discussions before on some fraud issues. I think where were we, in San Diego?
Mm-hmm.
That case just settled last week, by the way.
Excellent.
2 years later, 2.5 years later. But I think even on the accounting, like people talk about insurance experts, one of the reasons why I like doing what I do as an expert, more so than as an attorney, is to, I do have a lot of knowledge. I've been doing this for a long time. So to be able to explain it, like, this is really how it's supposed to work. Either the carrier really didn't follow its own rules, that's not fair.
Right.
Or, hey, the insured refused to give information out. Here's why that's important. The policy responds to this. And you go through these steps and you explain it. I get super passionate about it because I enjoy it so much. But I would imagine that would be the same on the forensic accounting, because I bet a lot of people don't know what forensic accounting is necessarily, and they don't always understand why it's important, what impact it has. And for someone like you, who is not only articulate and good at what you do, but you have this way of not dumbing it down, but making it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's different. And I remember you had the same passion. There's an accountant I know who was trying to explain to me like lost rents on a building. And, you know, it took me a long time to learn business interruption. And he turns and he's like, but Amy, look at this chart. Here's the sexy part. I'm like, oh my God, I say things like that when I'm talking about insurance. Do you find that you sometimes have to kind of do the same thing with policyholders and adjusters to kind of get everyone on the same page? Or, because it's not, you're right, I don't think it's totally hand-holding, but it's explaining.
Absolutely. And there is one of the things that I've found, part of being a professional is the ability to be able to work with other people when there are passionate views all around the table. And one of the things that I try to do, I oftentimes try to be the calming effect on, you know, on my client and in situations. And don't get me wrong, I have good righteous indignation. I know when to pull that out every once in a while. But a lot of it is the ability to break something down and to say, here's why this is important. I was just, I got hired to consult on a case. First time a economist is going to be testifying in court. And so they said, we want someone who's, you know, kind of number and analytical focus to help this guy. And part of it was just okay, you've got these great, and I saw his model and I was just, oh my God, this is a great model. I'm like, the jury's not going to get it. Here's what's important. And he's like, okay. I said, no, that's what your answer is. When anytime they try and get you into, well, how did you get to this number? Oh, well, I have to take this over here. I can do this over here. I got to that, and this, you know, and all that. I said, what you finish with is, here's why this is important. Yeah, it's a lot of math. Get it, you know, but this is why it's important. And I think breaking things down into saying, and especially with adjusters, because one of the things that I have found is that there are plenty of claims that I've done where helping an adjuster understand, why are we approaching it this way? Why does this make better sense in the way that his forensic accountant approached it? And being able to explain the why on that. And, you know, because there are times where I've come back and said, good try, guys, but you're missing the boat. And here's why you're missing the boat. Here's why we're looking at it on this basis. And a lot of it is being able to, you know, is to explain that and trying to keep things as simple as you can, because, you know, yeah, you throw two forensic accountants in the room, and, you know, we can go round and round and round and round on the nuance and all of the minutia and everything else. At the end of the day, bringing that back up to, what does that look like? And one of the things for me, I love it when I have, especially in litigation, but even in claim situations, I can show you some of the opposing, you know, and it doesn't matter whether it's insured or insurance company, but opposing forensic accountants that have these complex calculations on these sheets and going on and on and on. I will present for a claim a sheet that has plenty of white space on it and has 5 numbers, and that's it. And you start here and you end here, and this is how much you pay. I can't tell you how many adjusters were like, that's brilliant. I was like, what do you mean it's brilliant? And it's like, I know exactly what to pay. I know you start with revenue here, and then this is how much I pay at the end. And they're just, excited. And I was like, and to me, that's not brilliance. That's simple communication of a concept. But ever since that situation, I always try to keep it simple, break it down into into its simplest components, and just keep it simple, and people will be able to follow that.
Well, and I would think as an expert, I think that same analysis applies just in the insurance world. To simplify for me on the insurance consulting side, it's a contract. No one's doing anything more or less, and we don't expect you to do any more or less. We just want you to do what you're supposed to do under the policy, and it says you're supposed to do this and you didn't.
Right.
You get into bad faith, which is more of the extra contractual stuff, but it's a contract. It's like any other agreement you make when you purchase something, when you have service done. People kind of get that. And also, when you're talking about all these numbers and everything merging together, and sometimes I look at a tax return looking at a fraud claim. I do a lot of fraud in the arson investigations. Look at a tax return. I'm like, I have seriously no idea where to even start. And people think that about policies too, though, right? So if you take out, instead of going, okay, now go to definitions, now back to the insuring agreement. Okay, now exclusions, and that has a definition in it. An endorsement, and that takes out that. I put it all in order. So no one has to flip. No one has to, and I take out what's not needed. And that sounds very similar to what you do. Are you seeing a lot of, that really takes a different mindset and to kind of get out of your head a little bit. Do you find that other forensic accountants are kind of understanding that process, or are you still, fortunately, maybe a unique individual who gets that? Because clearly you do.
I like the way you use unique individual, because every time you say that, I smile and think insurance geek. Which I am.
I think we all are.
Unabashedly. Yeah, unabashedly. Here's what's interesting to me. And again, my concept, whether it's as insurance or insured, is the forensic accounting is necessary. The math is necessary. And I bring that to the table in spades. What you're really paying me for is the ability to explain, to understand, and to help communicate. That's what you're really getting. That's where the money comes, right? The thing that I have found, and so I am always, because there are some firms I've been at that said, you cannot even put any policy language in any report that you ever write. You can't quote policy language. You can't even quote the policy.
Is it because you're not an adjuster, quote unquote, an adjuster?
I'm not an adjuster. I'm not an attorney. And I would stop and I would say, okay, what do you think my job is? To do the math. Good. Okay. Let's expound upon that a little bit.
Why?
How am I supposed to do the math? Well, you're supposed to prepare a BI claim. Good. How do I know how to prepare the BI claim? Well, you're a forensic accountant. No. How do I know how to prepare the claim? And I will have attorneys that will look at each other like, what is this question? Where do I go to find out how to prepare the claim? And I'll say, I have to read the policy. The policy defines how the claim is going to be done. I said, you can't, no one, that, going out, telling a forensic accountant, I want you to do a BI claim, but I'm not going to give you the policy. Now, there are firms that will say, great, we'll do it. And they'll run an analysis and they'll throw it out there. And they'll say, okay, great. Was it a gross profits or was it a net profits policy? Was it a mercantile or was it a manufacturing policy? What did the policy say? What did the policy say about? Did it have continuing or non-continuing expense? And there are a lot of people who will brush over it. And the thing I say is, what part of my job is I have to read this policy, in insurance speak, and I have to translate it into accounting, and then I have to present it to people who understand neither. And so for me, it is integral. And I have been some pretty serious depositions about, you read the policy. Oh, well, what's your opinion about this? I said, well, I don't have an opinion. This is the plain wording of the policy. It says this, and this is how it is translated into accounting. And I have been very successful, again, on both sides of the fence. I've been very successful in that. There are some forensic accountants that their firms will not allow them to do that. And I think that's a real injustice, because they just say, we're here to do the math. We're here to do the analysis. And to me, you're somewhat missing out on that. And I've explained, the other good thing I have is that, again, spending a few years in Australia, I was an adjuster specifically for BI. So there are times where I'll come up and talk about, here's how this is adjusted, and explaining to juries. And you get the head nods from the jury about, when you're explaining these things. And so to me, that's critical. Not all forensic accountants do it. But I've been pretty successful in being able to do that. And I do believe, so you got to look at the declarations. You got to look, and you also have to look at the property, because sometimes there's some little hidden gems in the property that are going to affect the BI. And then you have to look at the BI, and then you have to look at exclusions, and then you have to look back and say, oh, well, of course, in Texas, do you have Texas windstorm and do you have Texas flood?
Right.
I mean,
So
after
Scott,
sorry.
well, I know I was going to say it sounds like, it sounds like this would be like one of the things that most people would disagree with you about your particular job. Like, you don't need to read the policy because you don't have an adjuster's license and you're not an adjuster.
Or an attorney.
Well, yes, we'll just, skip over those attorneys who should not be adjusting claims. It's just, that's a whole different.
I don't adjust.
That's a whole different podcast right there. But so would you say that is something that's almost a fundamental difference that you believe between you and other forensic accountants?
Absolutely. And it's something that, as an expert witness, one of the things that you always think about is stay in your lane. Make sure you're staying in your lane. And I've received pushback from some attorneys that are like, I don't know, isn't that the adjuster or this other expert we're going to have on there? And I'm like, this is your case. You're going to try it. You're going to take it whichever way you're going to take it. And that's fine. All I'm saying is, this is something I have to do my role.
Yeah, because
it's not like, it's part of the process of
right, because you couldn't do, for example, our tax accounting or whatever. Oh, good. Simon is here again, so we can all begin. As you know, Simon always appears at our podcasts. So it's do not try this. Okay, he's going to try to get through, for everybody who's listening, he's going to try to get through a very narrow opening, probably like 5 inches, and everything's going to go falling off of my desk. You're going to hear it clattering here soon, very soon. Anyway, it's almost like what I was going to say is that you can't do the tax accounting, our paying our taxes or whatever, without knowing how the IRS is going to, look for things. But you're not the IRS. So obviously you need to have the policy. I mean, that makes absolute sense to me. I don't understand why someone would think that's like a foreign concept to me. It would be like telling Go ahead.
Sorry, Chantel. No, finish, please.
Well, I was going to say, it's like telling an adjuster to adjust the claim without having the policy. Do I pay RCV, replacement cost value? Do I pay ACV, actual cash value first? Is there a sub limit for data or paper or silverware? Is there a deductible? Just because I'm not a trier of fact does not mean that I can't determine coverage, which, I mean,
I think it gives I think it gives some credibility to your position, though, because if you're not getting it from the policy, somebody is giving you that information. And so to be able to
Absolutely.
say, no, I just didn't take the lawyer's word for it, that there's this sublimit and there's lost rent to be included in this. I looked at the policy. I didn't just take their information and make it say what they want me to say. I looked at this.
So
I mean,
true.
me, that's like saying, hey, Amy, I'd like to hire you as my lawyer. I've been sued for breach of contract. I'll give you the complaint, but I'm not going to give you the contract. Now defend
Right.
me. And
Well,
I'm going to look, like, I don't know even what your terms are. How could I possibly do that?
and it's, and that, it, to me, that's just a natural, to me, that's just naturally, you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to read the policy. I actually had which is one of the largest claims I ever worked on as business interruption consulting. And they had the insured, it was for the insured, and they had claims preparation coverage and actually had significant amounts in there. I was like, God, if only I could hit the limits on that. I'm submitting my invoices, and it is well below what the limit was on that. And so I'm thinking, no problem. The insurance company is going to pay. They send back an analysis of my billing, and they said, we're not going to pay for you to read the policy. And I was like, okay, show me in the insurance contract where it says where it says whether or not what you're going to pay for hiring accountants to come in to certify details of the claim. And they're like, what? I said, show me where I'm submitted to you my invoices. This is what it cost them to do it. You have accepted the claim, and the claim has been settled, which means you accept the work that I've done, which means that my billing is reasonable. And so, for you to come in and to say, oh, it took you 6 hours to do this, and you really could have done it in 4 hours. Nope. It took what it took to be able to get it done. And I went toe to toe with the adjuster on it. And, I ended up talking to the adjuster's manager and explained to him, what I was doing. And I said, number one, I said, I'm well below the limits, that it is what it is. The policy doesn't give you, the policy says you will pay. It's exactly what it says. It says you will pay. You will pay for this service, and the manager laughed, and he said, I bet, I would love to see you in action on a claim. And I was like, why? And he said, I bet you understand policy better than some of my adjusters. And I said, when it comes to BI, I probably do.
Yeah.
You
And
probably do.
well, and it was interesting because
This episode of Insurance Suits is sponsored by the American Association of Insurance Management Consultants, or AMCO, a nonprofit trade association comprised of insurance and risk professionals ranging from actuarial, underwriting, acquisition and transactions, and adjuster, agent, and broker standards of care. Find out more at www.aaimco.com.
down the road, I ended up getting a call from this manager and said, we have a case. We need to hire a forensic accountant. And he said, I was thinking about it. We were going to hire this firm, well-known firm, good firm that does it. He said, but then I thought about you. He said, will you do work for an insurance company? I said, absolutely. I said, I used to be an EGA, and, I have no problem whatsoever. And ended up picking up a case. And I was like, why? And he said, I just felt like when it comes to litigation, someone who understands coverage and understands BI and understands the accounting would be a pretty formidable person in the courtroom. And, that's kind of the way it goes. Now, that case ended up settling. I never got a chance to actually testify in court on it. But I'm amazed at how many times I get my deposition, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, when the other side comes back and says, so we'd like to consider settlement. Now,
Yeah, don't you love that?
yeah, well, and there's one side of it that I want to be very egotistical and say, you know what, I'm just that good. But oftentimes what I'm finding and what attorneys will tell me is they said you'll have one or two key experts in a case. And once those depositions are taken, the other side understands how strong or how weak they're going to be in court. And he said, oftentimes, once they get those depositions, they're like, oh, they got the right experts. This is not going to look good in court. So let's try and get the best settlement we can get now. And
I
I
agree with you on
personally,
that.
what's that?
I'd agree with you on that, because anyone can write a report and crunch the numbers. Someone's got to explain it.
Right. And one of the things that I firmly believe is, in most cases, a settled claim is the best outcome for both sides. And I have had insureds that were, going to fight for, every penny on a claim. And it's like, you're going to get to a point where you have that diminishing return. This is a good number. If you get a little bit more, great. But this is a relatively good number. Consider that. And with an insurance company having a settled claim, okay, we're done. We're done. We're paid out. On to the next thing. I think that there is, I think in most cases, from what I've seen, very few of the cases actually make it into the courtroom, because there's some form of settlement that goes on somewhere, somewhere down that road.
I do think that is the goal, is to settle a claim. So, Scott, let me ask you, what is one question that Amy and I haven't asked you that you wish we would have, and what's your answer?
Oh, good Lord.
Like, what's
your
right now? Think it.
What is it? See, I don't know, because I don't know what people look for. This is funny as this is going to sound. I don't always know what people look for in forensic accountants. I
can tell you what I look for. I look for people who can add. So if I can't add, that's just me.
Well, here's here's one question. Why do you think it's important to hire a forensic accountant in a claim?
Okay, perfect.
Let's just go with that. I think that's one of the basic questions, because there is especially for policyholders, one of the things that I always say is, if I get called when you got the denial letter and you're talking to the attorney and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do next, okay, oftentimes that's 8 months, 9 months, a year down the road from when you had a claim. And if you bring me in, then I'm having to go back and look at, well, what did you give to the other forensic accountant? Well, did they ask for this? Did they ask for that? What's the details of this claim? What's going on? What's happening, right? What's the details of the loss? And I'm having to go back and spend a lot of time trying to understand what happened, how was it analyzed, and then determine, okay, what do I need to do now? When I get hired a few days after the incident, the thing that I get to do is, number one, I can get with the insured early and I can help them go, here's how this process is supposed to work. This is what's going to happen. Okay, so let's be prepared for it. When the adjuster comes out to, inspect the site and to have his meetings, I can be there and I can say, and we can inspect the site. And there are oftentimes, there's things I see on a site that I sit back and say, the damage to that machine over there or to this damage over here is going to affect BI. And here's kind of how I think it's going to affect BI. How many times do you get that as an adjuster? Not many, right? Yeah. And so part of, being hired early in that process is I help advise the insured, but I'm also helping advising the adjuster. And, we can sit down and say, okay, here's kind of, here's spitball a little bit. Here's how I think this model is going to look. We can prepare a model early. We can submit it to the adjuster. And the other thing that does is it's like, so now we're saying, here's the model. What do you think? The adjuster comes back and says, I had my forensic accountant look at it. And he says this and this. Great. You know what just happened? You just accepted my model with 2 modifications. and we can talk about those modifications, whether they're reasonable or not, how we address it. And the other thing we get to do, so let's say it takes us 9 months to finish, to, you know, restore the business and to start operations again. In those 9 months, I bet we've tackled every major issue in the claim has probably been tackled, addressed. Those that aren't, we know what the insurance company is saying, and we know what our position is. It's well defined, and we kind of know what's there. And when it comes down to that final settlement meeting, it is, we've addressed all of the major stuff. We've probably addressed all the minor issues, and it's just a matter of, okay, we say it's 1.2 million. You say it's, you know, 950,000. Great. Okay. How do we, you know, what are the differences, and how can we, you know, how can we work through that? And you've probably gotten advance payments, and whatever they owe is probably not the full 950 that they think in their head. It's actually probably 200,000. So during this period of time, you've got money for your BI, and you've been able to, you know, use it to keep the operations going or whatever you needed to do. And at the end of the day, you're in a much better position. When I get called in 8 months, 9 months down the road after they've gotten the denial letter and they said that just can't be the number, you know, you didn't get any advance payments. You didn't, you know, all these things didn't happen. You're now strapped for cash. You know, and it's just, it's not as good a position to be in. And so that's one of the reasons I always, and here's the other thing that I often say that you won't hear. I get hired early in a claim, and if it's any operation of size, I will say, who do you use for counsel for your claims? And they'll be, what? Who do you use for counsel for your claims? I mean, surely you have inside or outside counsel that helps with claims, right? And they're like, no. Well, why do you ask? Oh, well, if 9 months down the road this doesn't settle, and you decide to take this to litigation, if you have an attorney for the past 9 months that I'm checking in with, and that I'm communicating with, and that's communicating with you, and that's kind of just watching the process, watching what's going on, if it doesn't settle, that attorney is going to be 100 times better prepared for what happens next than coming in cold. And I said, and during the adjustment process, having an attorney looking over the shoulders of the people sitting around that table is not a bad idea. Now, adjuster's not going to pay for that. You know, they're not going to pay for that, but that's money well spent, having an attorney there. I actually had an attorney in New Orleans that we did 9 claims together, exactly like that. Whenever he got called about a claim, he would say, hey, who are you using for forensic accountants? And whenever I got called, I was like, who's your outside counsel? And we had 8 different claims that we did that way. And we had walked into one of them, and they said, okay, we know you guys are a team, but are you in the same firm? And we're like, we look at each other, we're like, no, we're not in the same firm. We're not necessarily a team. We just know each other. But, you know, we got a bit of a reputation for, I want to say about a 4-year period of time, you know, of working, you know, just working together and getting very good results for our clients. And so I think that's, you know, one of the reasons having your expert, you know, having a counsel, having a forensic accountant early in a claim really does help with the process, because you've got someone there that can call the bluff of, and I say call the bluff an adjuster, but, you know, explain and talk to an adjuster and their forensic accountant and say, here's why this is the right way to look at this, and be able to get agreement, being able to get that stuff taken care of.
Would you say that is the one nugget people should take away, or is there something else that listeners should take away from your interview today?
I think that's a really good nugget to take away. I do too. I think the other side of it, because again, I have clients right now that are insurance companies, and I have clients that are insureds. And I think the other takeaway I would say is there's a lot of insurance companies that are like, you either work for insurance companies or you don't work for us. And one of the things that I often say is, it doesn't matter what side I'm on, my procedures don't change. My opinions don't change.
Right.
I'm going to ask for the insurance policy. I'm going to do certain analysis. I might look at the loss differently than an accountant on the other side might look at.
True.
Which is my prerogative. But it's not like my procedures change. And the fact that I testify on that I have clients on both sides, to me, seems to be, well, this is a pretty well balanced guy. You know, he's been on both sides. He kind of knows how this system works. And I think that's another good nugget that I would pick out of there, is that, you know, having that balanced look, you know, someone that can be a very balanced person, especially, you know, when you start getting into, you know, depositions, testimony, and, you know, that type of thing.
When you're talking about like a bad faith standard of reasonableness, and, you know, what their conduct was, the carrier's conduct reasonable, was the insured's conduct reasonable? You know, when you bring that to the table, I think that lends a lot of support toward resolution.
It's interesting with bad faith, because one of the things, so Texas, getting a bad faith judgment in Texas is not an easy deal. I don't know how it is in other states, but Texas is that's hard to do. And the other thing that I often say is in my mind, forensic accounting and bad faith as it relates to forensic accounting, you would probably have gross negligence of an accountant before you had bad faith, you know, on the forensic accounting side. And, you know, the only situation I can ever think of is kind of forensic accountant does an analysis and said, okay, you know, my analysis is pay $500,000, and the adjuster says, I'm going to pay $450,000. Well, to me, that's, you know, it's bad faith on the adjusting, not bad faith on the forensic accounting.
Right.
Yeah.
So Scott, where can listeners find you online?
So I have, if www.businessinterruptionconsulting.com, and it's myself and my partner, Greg Schulke. We have several staff people, we just have we have our CFO, our chief feline officer, Gigi, who we're trying to get a profile put on the website. I noticed that you had a CFO as well.
Yes, mine is actually the office manager. Yeah, Simon is the
office manager. Okay.
Yeah. But I guess he could be the CFO, because he does go after attorneys if they don't pay me on time. And then of course I've got the marketing officer, who is Red.
You can also, my number is 713-751-9553. And another thing is we do cases all over the US and all over the world. I still have a few clients that I pick up from Australia from time to time. One of the benefits I have is I am very well versed in the industrial special risk policy, which is a Commonwealth nations type of policy, which is a little bit different than the US policies. But I'm very experienced in that as well. And I've actually had a few cases in the US where an ISR policy was, you know, the base policy that that was going into litigation. So we do work all over the US and all over the world. And today, with podcasting and with Zoom and all this stuff, it is so much easier to be able to connect with clients and, you know, to be able to kind of extend your reach.
Yeah, well, great. So this wraps up another Insurance Suits podcast. I'm Chantel Roberts, and I'd like to thank my co-host, Amy Johnson and Scott Bushnell, for joining us today. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Please like, follow, subscribe to our podcast on your favorite distribution channel, and give us a review, a 5-star review, please. If you need insurance consultants or expert witnesses, you can go to AIMCO. That's www.aimco.com. Or if you are a consultant or an expert witness, go to our page to learn more about us. We would love to have you. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.